Hello, my dear adventurers. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and speculation. Tonight, we are going deep into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, into the theories, the rumors, and the mysteries surrounding what might just be the most anticipated superhero film ever made, Avengers Doomsday. Now, if you have been anywhere near the internet in the past year or so, you will know that this film has been generating an almost absurd amount of excitement. And honestly, when you look at what Marvel is doing here, bringing together the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and dozens of beloved characters to face off against Dr. Doom, played by none other than Robert Downey Jr., well, it is not hard to see why people are losing their minds over this. The film does not arrive until December 18th, 2026. But here is the thing. The theories and speculation floating around right now are already rich enough to fill an entire evening, and that is exactly what we are going to do tonight. We are going to go through everything, every major theory, every confirmed detail, every wild piece of speculation that the fandom has cooked up, and we are going to do it in the most relaxed, unhurried way possible. So if you are listening to this as you settle in for the night, perfect. Let the theories carry you off. There is no rush here. We have all the time in the world. I think if you are more of a casual Marvel fan, someone who has enjoyed the films without necessarily diving deep into the lore and the comic book history, there is going to be loads of fascinating stuff to explore tonight. And if you are a hardcore fan who has been following every leak and every rumor, well, I think there will still be plenty here to chew on. I am going to try to cover as much ground as I can, but there is always more to talk about in future videos. So here is the plan for tonight. We are going to start with Dr. Doom himself, because honestly, you cannot understand what Doomsday is going to be about without understanding who this character is and why he is considered the greatest villain in Marvel Comics history. We will talk about his origins, his powers, his philosophy, and why Robert Downey Jr. was chosen to play him. After that, we will trace the road that brought us here, the entire Multiverse Saga, from Loki and the Time Variance Authority, to incursions and anchor beings and everything in between. Then we will go through the absolutely massive cast that has been confirmed for this film, broken down by team, so you know exactly who is fighting Doom and why they matter. Once we have all that foundation laid, we will dive into the theories themselves, the big ones, the opening sequence that might destroy an entire universe in the first 10 minutes, Doom's master plan to dismantle the multiverse from the inside, the possibility of an Avengers versus X-Men battle, the final war in Latveria, all of it. And then, because we have to, we will talk about who might not survive, because the Russo brothers have been very clear that this is going to be a film with real consequences. Not everyone is making it out alive. And finally, we will talk about how Doomsday sets up Avengers Secret Wars, the sequel arriving exactly 1 year later on December 17th, 2027, and what that means for the future of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. Plenty to get through, but we will take it slow and easy. If you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider checking out my Patreon linked in the description down below. But for now, grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let us begin our journey into the world of Dr. Doom and the end of the multiverse as we know it. Before we get into the theories and the speculation, I think it is really important that we start with the character at the center of everything. Because Dr. Doom is not just another Marvel villain. He is arguably the most important villain in the entire history of Marvel Comics. And understanding who he is, where he comes from, and what drives him is absolutely essential to understanding what Avengers Doomsday is going to be about. So let us start at the very beginning, because Doom's origin story is one of the most compelling and tragic backstories in all of comics. And honestly, once you know it, you start to understand why Marvel went to such extraordinary lengths to bring this character to the big screen. Victor Von Doom was not born into privilege. He was not born into power. He was born into a Romani camp in the fictional Eastern European nation of Latveria, a small, isolated country surrounded by the Carpathian Mountains. His people were persecuted, marginalized, and oppressed by the ruling baron who controlled the country with an iron fist. Doom's mother, Cynthia, was a sorceress. She was a powerful woman who practiced the mystical arts, and she had made a deal with a demon named Mephisto. The details of that deal are dark and tragic, but the short version is that Cynthia died as a result of it, and her soul was trapped in the demon's realm. This is important because it becomes the driving force behind everything Victor does for the rest of his life. His mother's soul, imprisoned by a demon, haunting him from childhood. That loss shaped him into the man he would become. His father, Werner, was a healer, a doctor in the traditional sense. A gentle, pacifist man who tried to keep his head down and survive under the Baron's rule. But when the Baron's wife fell ill and Werner could not save her, the Baron blamed him. Werner was forced to flee into the frozen wilderness with young Victor, and he died from exposure while trying to protect his son. He wrapped Victor in his own clothes to keep the boy warm, sacrificing his own life in the process. So by the time Victor was a teenager, he had lost both parents, his mother to a demon, his father to a tyrant, and he was alone in the world with nothing but his grief, his rage, and his extraordinary mind. Because here's the thing about Victor Von Doom. He is a genius, not just smart, not just clever. He is one of the most intelligent beings in the entire Marvel universe, on par with Reed Richards, Tony Stark, and Bruce Banner, maybe even surpassing them in certain areas. And when young Victor discovered his mother's hidden trove of mystical artifacts, he realized he had inherited not just her grief, but her gift for sorcery. He began teaching himself both science and magic simultaneously, becoming something that is incredibly rare in the Marvel universe, a person who has mastered both disciplines at the highest level. His intellect was so extraordinary that he earned a scholarship to State University in New York, which is where he met Reed Richards for the first time. And this meeting would define both of their lives forever. Reed and Victor were instant rivals, two brilliant minds who immediately recognized each other's genius and immediately resented each other for it. They competed for everything: academic honors, research grants, recognition. But Victor was also secretly working on something deeply personal. He was building a machine designed to bridge the gap between dimensions, a device that would allow him to contact his mother's trapped soul in Mephisto's realm. Reed noticed a flaw in Victor's calculations and tried to warn him. But Victor, driven by pride and desperation, refused to listen. He activated the machine, and it exploded in his face, literally. The blast scarred Victor's face, and the university expelled him for conducting unauthorized and dangerous experiments. Victor blamed Reed Richards for the accident. Whether that blame is justified depends on which version of the story you believe. Some tellings suggest Reed could have tried harder to intervene. Others suggest Victor's pride would have prevented him from listening regardless. But from that moment forward, Victor Von Doom held Reed Richards responsible for his disfigurement, his expulsion, and the destruction of his work to save his mother. What happened next is one of the most iconic origin sequences in comic book history. Disgraced and scarred, Victor wandered the world. He eventually found his way to a remote monastery in Tibet, where a group of monks took him in. He spent years there, learning everything they could teach him about the fusion of science and sorcery. He advanced beyond their teachings, developing techniques and technologies that blended mystical energy with mechanical engineering in ways no one had ever imagined. And when he was ready, he had the monks forge him a suit of armor. Not just any armor, a suit of magic-enhanced, technologically advanced battle armor topped with an iron mask to hide his scarred face forever. There is actually a famously dark detail in the comics about this moment. In some versions of the story, Victor was so impatient that he placed the mask on his face before it had fully cooled, searing the hot metal into his already damaged skin. He chose to embrace the pain. He chose to let the mask become part of him. From that moment forward, he was no longer Victor Von Doom. He was Dr. Doom. He returned to Latveria. He rallied his people, the Romani who had been oppressed for generations, and he led a revolution against the Baron who had killed his father. Doom overthrew the ruling class, seized power, and crowned himself the absolute monarch of Latveria. He renamed the capital city Doomstadt. He built an army of robotic duplicates called Doombots, artificial intelligences so advanced that some of them genuinely believe they are the real Dr. Doom. He transformed Latveria from a backward, oppressed nation into a technological powerhouse. And here is where Doom gets really interesting, because his country is actually by many measures a good place to live. There is no poverty, no disease, no famine, no crime. His citizens are cared for, educated, and protected. The catch, of course, is that they live under the absolute control of a dictator who tolerates no dissent and demands total obedience. This is what makes Dr. Doom such a compelling villain. He is not purely evil. He genuinely believes he is the only person capable of bringing order to a chaotic world. He looks at humanity and sees suffering, war, corruption, and waste, and he believes that if everyone simply submitted to his rule, he could fix all of it. His intentions, in his own mind, are noble. He wants to save humanity. He just wants to do it by conquering humanity first. It is a God complex of the highest order, but it is rooted in real pain, real loss, and a genuine desire to prevent others from suffering the way he did. In terms of raw power, Doom is terrifying. His armor gives him superhuman strength, energy projection, force fields, and flight. His scientific genius allows him to build weapons, robots, and devices that rival anything Tony Stark or Reed Richards can create. But he is also a sorcerer powerful enough to challenge Doctor Strange. He can cast spells, summon demons, manipulate time, and access dimensions that most humans cannot even perceive. In the comics, he has stolen the powers of the Silver Surfer, absorbed the energy of the Beyonder, an omnipotent cosmic entity, and even briefly became God when he seized the Beyonder's power during the 2015 Secret Wars event. That last detail is particularly relevant to what we are going to be discussing tonight, but we will get to that later. Dr. Doom first appeared in the Fantastic Four, issue number 5, published in 1962. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Lee has said that he wanted a name that was, and I am paraphrasing here, eloquent in its simplicity and magnificent in its implied menace. And honestly, Dr. Doom might be the most perfectly named villain in all of fiction. The character was intended to be the Fantastic Four's ultimate nemesis, but over the decades he grew into something much larger than that. He became an antagonist for the Avengers, the X-Men, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Black Panther, and Doctor Strange. He is consistently ranked as one of the greatest comic book villains ever created. And now, finally, after 60 years and 3 previous attempts at bringing him to the big screen, Dr. Doom is coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he is being played by the man who started it all. Robert Downey Jr. was the actor who launched the MCU. When he put on the Iron Man suit in 2008 and told the world, "I am Iron Man," he changed cinema forever. He played Tony Stark across 11 years and 10 films, culminating in Avengers Endgame in 2019, where Tony Stark sacrificed his life to save the universe. It was one of the most emotional moments in blockbuster history. A perfect ending for a beloved character. And most people assumed that was the last we would ever see of Robert Downey Jr. in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They were wrong. At San Diego Comic-Con in July 2024, Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the entire entertainment industry. First, he confirmed that the Kang storyline was being abandoned. Jonathan Majors, who had been cast as Kang the Conqueror, the planned big villain of the Multiverse Saga, had been fired following assault allegations and a subsequent conviction. The film, previously titled Avengers the Kang Dynasty, needed a new direction. And then Feige revealed what that direction would be. Multiple figures in green cloaks and metal masks walked onto the stage at Hall H. They were all dressed as Dr. Doom. And then one of them reached up and pulled off his mask. It was Robert Downey Jr. The crowd erupted. People were chanting, "RDJ, RDJ." It was, as one journalist from IGN described it, one of the most dramatic reveals in recent Marvel history. The film was retitled Avengers Doomsday. The Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe Russo, who directed Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Captain America: Civil War, Avengers: Infinity War, and Avengers: Endgame, were confirmed to be returning as directors. Downey himself had insisted on this as a condition of his return. He would only come back if the Russos came back too. And Stephen McFeely, who co-wrote Infinity War and Endgame, was brought on to co-write the screenplay alongside Michael Waldron, the creator of Loki. Now, let me be clear about something, because there has been a lot of confusion about this. Robert Downey Jr. is not playing Tony Stark. Tony Stark is dead. He died in Endgame. What Downey is playing is a completely different character, Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom. This was confirmed when Doom appeared in the post-credits scene of the Fantastic Four: First Steps in 2025, visiting young Franklin Richards at the Baxter Building. That scene established Doom as a separate character in the MCU, the ruler of Latveria, not a variant of Tony Stark. That said, there is a persistent fan theory that this version of Doom might be a Stark variant from another universe, someone who lived a different life and became Doom instead of Iron Man. It is an interesting theory, and we will discuss it later tonight. But the Russos and the available evidence strongly suggest this is a comics-accurate Victor Von Doom. Joe Russo described Doom in an interview with Empire magazine as three-dimensional and one of the most complex comic book characters in existence. He said that Downey was the one person who could take on the role. And honestly, when you think about the level of charisma, intelligence, and intensity that Doom requires, it is hard to argue with that casting. The fan response was mixed, which is understandable. Some people praised it as a masterstroke, arguing that Downey has the acting chops and the screen presence to make Doom one of the greatest villains in cinema history. Others were more skeptical, calling it a desperate move from a studio that had been struggling creatively in the post-Endgame era. Both perspectives have merit, but what cannot be denied is that the announcement reignited interest in the MCU in a way that nothing else in Phase 4 or 5 had managed to do. Dr. Doom, played by Robert Downey Jr., directed by the Russo brothers. That is a combination that demands attention. Fun fact about the announcement. When Downey walked onto the stage in the Doom costume, many people in the audience initially did not realize it was him. The mask was fully covering his face, and there were multiple Doom figures on stage. It was only when he pulled off the mask that the crowd understood what was happening. The reveal was designed to mirror the character of Doom himself, someone who hides behind a mask, whose true identity is always a surprise. And there is something poetic about Robert Downey Jr. returning to the MCU, not as the hero who saved the universe, but as the villain who might destroy it. Tony Stark gave his life to protect reality. Dr. Doom wants to reshape it in his own image. Same actor, opposite sides of the same coin. The Russos have talked about how that duality is central to the story they want to tell. How Doom is, in many ways, what Tony Stark could have become if his life had gone differently. If instead of becoming a hero, he had become a conqueror. That thematic richness is what makes this casting choice so brilliant, regardless of how you feel about it. And it is what makes Dr. Doom such a perfect villain for this moment in the MCU. He is not Thanos. Thanos was a force of nature, a titan pursuing a twisted philosophy with the power of the Infinity Stones. Doom is something different. Doom is human. Doom is brilliant. Doom is tragic. And Doom believes, with every fiber of his being, that he is right, that the multiverse needs him, that only he can save it, and that anyone who stands in his way, no matter how heroic, is simply too blind to understand. That conviction, that absolute certainty in his own superiority, is what makes Dr. Doom dangerous. And it is what is going to make Avengers Doomsday unlike anything we have seen in the MCU before. But to understand exactly what Doom is planning and why the multiverse is in danger, we need to talk about how we got here. The entire Multiverse Saga has been building to this moment, and the road has been long, complicated, and honestly, quite beautiful in places. So let us trace it from the beginning. The story of how we arrived at Avengers Doomsday really begins with a show that most people did not expect to be this important. Loki. When the first season of Loki premiered on Disney Plus in 2021, it seemed like a fun side adventure for Tom Hiddleston's beloved trickster god. A variant of Loki, the one who escaped with the Tesseract during the time heist in Avengers Endgame, gets arrested by a mysterious organization and has to navigate a weird bureaucratic nightmare. It sounded entertaining, but not essential. And then the show completely rewrote the rules of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the very first episode, we were introduced to the Time Variance Authority, the TVA. This was an otherworldly organization that existed outside normal time and space, and its purpose was to monitor and maintain what it called the sacred timeline. According to the TVA's animated mascot, Miss Minutes, there had once been a vast multiversal war. Countless unique timelines battled each other for supremacy, threatening to destroy all of reality. The Timekeepers, mysterious entities who controlled the flow of time, ended the war by weaving every strand of the multiverse into one single cohesive timeline, the sacred timeline. And the TVA existed to keep it that way, pruning any branching timeline that deviated too far from the approved path. Now, that was the official story, the version the TVA told its employees, most of whom had their memories wiped and did not even know they were variants from pruned timelines themselves. The truth, as Loki and his variant Sylvie discovered over the course of the season, was much darker. At the end of Season 1, Loki and Sylvie reached the Citadel at the end of time, a fortress beyond the edge of reality itself. And there they met the man behind the curtain. He called himself He Who Remains. A scientist from the 31st century, a variant of a man named Nathaniel Richards, who had discovered that parallel universes existed stacked on top of his own. Other variants of himself made the same discovery. And for a while, there was peace. These variants shared knowledge and technology across realities. But peace never lasts, does it? Some variants saw new worlds not as opportunities for cooperation, but as territories to conquer. The result was the multiversal war, a conflict of unimaginable scale where entire realities fought for supremacy and dominance. He Who Remains ended the war by weaponizing an entity called Alioth, a massive cloud-like creature that consumed timelines and everything within them. He used Alioth to wipe out his rival variants and establish the sacred timeline, a single approved flow of reality that would never produce another dangerous Kang variant. The TVA was his enforcement mechanism, pruning any branch that might lead to another war. He Who Remains was not a hero. He was a dictator. But he believed his dictatorship was necessary to prevent something worse. And then Sylvie killed him. She drove a blade through his chest. And in that moment, the sacred timeline shattered. The multiverse was freed. Branches began splitting off in every direction, infinite new timelines forming simultaneously, each one containing its own reality, its own versions of every person, every planet, every possibility. The multiverse was alive again, and that meant the multiversal war could start again too. This is where Loki Season 2 becomes absolutely crucial to understanding Avengers Doomsday, because Season 2 dealt with the consequences of that decision. Without He Who Remains to manage it, the multiverse was growing out of control, and the temporal loom, a massive piece of machinery at the heart of the TVA that processed and regulated timeline energy, began to overload. The loom was designed as a failsafe. If He Who Remains died, the loom would eventually overload and destroy every branching timeline, resetting reality back to a single thread. It was a dead man's switch for the multiverse. He Who Remains' final insurance policy. If he could not control reality, no one would. Loki, Mobius, Sylvie, and the rest of the TVA spent the entire second season trying to prevent this catastrophe. They tried to recalibrate the loom. They tried to expand its capacity. They even brought in a variant of He Who Remains himself, a man named Victor Timely, hoping he could fix the technology he had originally designed. Nothing worked. The branches were multiplying faster than any mechanical system could handle. And in the finale, Loki faced an impossible choice. The temporal loom was going to explode, destroying every timeline in existence, every universe, every life, every version of every person who had ever existed across all of reality. Gone, and the only way to prevent it was for someone to take the loom's place, to physically hold the timelines together, not with a machine, but with their own body, their own will, their own sacrifice. Loki walked out onto that bridge, the one leading to the loom, knowing exactly what it would cost him. He had spent the entire season learning to time slip, jumping between past and future, trying to find a timeline where everyone survived. He tried hundreds of times, thousands, and in every single timeline, someone died. The loom exploded. The multiverse collapsed. There was no solution that saved everyone, except one. Loki tore the temporal loom apart with his bare hands. He grabbed every branching timeline, every thread of reality, and he pulled them into himself. He walked to the end of time, to the throne that He Who Remains had once occupied, And he sat down, and he held the multiverse together, not with technology, not with force, with love, with sacrifice, with the choice to give up everything he was, his freedom, his identity, his chance at happiness, so that every other life in every other universe could continue to exist. The final image of Loki Season 2 is one of the most powerful in the entire MCU. Loki sitting alone on a throne of dying timelines, branches growing from him like the roots of an enormous cosmic tree, holding the multiverse together through sheer force of will. He is alive, but he is alone, forever. He chose to be the one who remains, not as a dictator, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. It is a profoundly moving moment, and it is essential to understanding what comes next. Because here is the thing. Loki is now the anchor of the entire multiverse. He is the thing holding everything together. And according to the theories circulating about Avengers Doomsday, Dr. Doom knows this. Doom understands that if he wants to control the multiverse, if he wants to reshape reality in his own image, he needs to get to Loki. He needs to remove the one being who is keeping everything from falling apart. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before we get to Doom's plan, we need to understand one more crucial concept. Incursions. The word incursion was first introduced to the MCU in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in 2022, when Doctor Strange and America Chavez traveled to Earth 838, an alternate universe. They were arrested by the Illuminati, a secret council of that world's greatest heroes. The council included Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, Captain Carter, Black Bolt, Professor Charles Xavier, and Captain Marvel, who in that universe was Maria Rambeau. And it was Reed Richards who explained the concept. An incursion, he said, is what happens when the boundary between two universes erodes and they collide. The collision destroys one or both of the universes entirely, and Earth, in every universe, is always the collision point. The Illuminati had dealt with incursions before. Their version of Doctor Strange had caused one by using the Darkhold to dreamwalk into another universe, and the resulting incursion destroyed an entire reality. They killed their own Strange to prevent it from happening again. Now, in the comics, incursions are even more terrifying and far-reaching. The concept was created by writer Jonathan Hickman during his legendary 2013 to 2015 run on Avengers and New Avengers. In that storyline, the entire multiverse was contracting. Universes were being pulled toward each other, colliding at their Earth points, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The only way to survive an incursion was to destroy the other Earth before it could destroy yours, which meant the heroes of Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, were faced with an impossible moral question. Do you destroy another world to save your own? Do you kill billions of innocent people to protect billions of your own? The Illuminati, a secret group consisting of Reed Richards, Tony Stark, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Namor, and Black Bolt, tried to find alternatives. They built devices to push worlds apart. They searched for diplomatic solutions. But eventually, they were forced to confront the horrifying reality that some incursions could only be stopped through destruction. The moral weight of that choice tore the group apart. Black Panther refused to destroy another world. Namor did it without hesitation and was expelled from the group. The entire storyline was a masterclass in exploring what happens when good people are forced into impossible situations, and it all led to Secret Wars. In 2015, Marvel published Secret Wars, the culmination of Hickman's years-long epic. The final incursion was happening. The last two Earths in the multiverse, Earth 616 and Earth 1610, the ultimate universe, were on a collision course, and there was no way to stop it. The multiverse was dying, but Dr. Doom had a plan. Throughout the incursion crisis, Doom had been working in the shadows. He discovered that the incursions were being caused by beings called the Beyonders, omnipotent entities from outside the multiverse who were engineering the destruction of all reality as an experiment. Doom tracked down the Beyonders, stole their power using a chain of living bombs called Molecule Men, and used that stolen omnipotence to preserve what remained of the multiverse after the final incursion destroyed everything. Doom took the fragments of destroyed realities and stitched them together into a single patchwork world called Battleworld. He made himself God, literally. God, Emperor Doom. He rewrote history so that every surviving being believed Doom had always been their creator and ruler. He gave himself everything he ever wanted: power, control, order. He even took Reed Richards' wife, Sue Storm, and made her his own. And for a time, it worked. Battleworld existed under Doom's absolute rule, until the heroes began to remember who they really were. That comic book storyline, Secret Wars 2015, is what the MCU is adapting with Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. The Russo brothers and the writers have been very clear about this. The multiverse is under threat. Incursions are happening. And Dr. Doom is going to position himself as the only person who can save it, by destroying it first and rebuilding it under his control. There is one more concept we need to understand before we move on, and it comes from one of the more recent MCU films. Anchor beings. In Deadpool and Wolverine, released in 2024, we learned that every universe has an anchor being, a specific individual whose existence holds that universe together. When an anchor being dies, their universe begins to die as well. It starts to decay, to unravel, and eventually it is marked for pruning by the TVA. Wade Wilson's universe was dying because its Wolverine, its anchor being, was dead. This concept is reportedly central to Avengers Doomsday. If Doom is systematically causing incursions, one way to do it would be to target anchor beings across multiple universes. Kill the anchor, and the universe starts to collapse. And the biggest anchor being of all, the one holding not just a single universe, but the entire multiverse together, is Loki. Sitting alone at the end of time, holding every branch of reality in his hands. If Doom gets to Loki, if he finds a way to reach the end of time and eliminate or absorb Loki's power, then there is nothing left to prevent the multiverse from collapsing entirely. Every universe, every timeline, every reality would be at risk, and Doom would be in a position to pick up the pieces and build something new from the rubble. That is the setup for Avengers Doomsday. The sacred timeline is free but fragile. Loki is holding it together through sacrifice. Incursions are beginning to cascade. And Dr. Doom, the most brilliant and dangerous villain Marvel has ever created, is making his move. Now, here is what makes this whole situation even more extraordinary. Doom is not going to be facing just one team of heroes. He is going to be facing everyone. And I mean everyone. The cast of Avengers Doomsday is the largest in Marvel history. It is genuinely staggering when you see the list of characters and actors involved. So let us go through it. Because understanding who is fighting Doom and what each team brings to the table is essential to understanding the theories about how this story plays out. The confirmed cast for Avengers Doomsday was revealed in one of the most unusual ways in Hollywood history. On March 26, 2025, coinciding with the start of production, Marvel Studios launched a nearly 5.5-hour live stream. That is not a typo. 5.5 hours. The stream showed a row of directors' chairs at Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire, England, with each chair bearing the name of a cast member. One by one, names were revealed over the course of the stream, and the sheer scale of the roster became clear. This was not just a big movie. This was an event. The cinematic equivalent of every major Marvel storyline converging into a single point. Filming began on April 28, 2025, under the working title Apple Pie 1. Location filming took place in Bahrain by the end of May and at Windsor Great Park in June and August. The production wrapped on September 19, 2025, though the Hollywood Reporter noted that there would be a healthy amount of additional photography expected to take place in early 2026. Jeffrey Ford is editing the film, having worked on previous MCU projects. So let us go through the teams. And honestly, just reading through this list gives you a sense of how massive this film is going to be. First, the Avengers. Chris Hemsworth returns as Thor, the Asgardian god of thunder. We last saw Thor in Love and Thunder in 2022, where he adopted a young girl named Love, the resurrected daughter of Gore, the god butcher. The Doomsday teasers suggest Thor has been living as a father, raising this child in relative peace. But peace never lasts in the MCU, and Thor will be drawn back into the fight. There is a leaked line from the film, captured on IMDb, that shows Thor praying to his father Odin, asking for the strength to fight one more enemy and return home to his daughter. Not as a warrior, but as warmth. It is a beautiful piece of writing, and it suggests that Thor's arc in this film will be deeply personal. Anthony Mackie returns as Sam Wilson, Captain America. Sam took up the shield at the end of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and was fully established as the new Captain America in Captain America: Brave New World. He represents the next generation of Avengers leadership. And then there is Chris Evans. He is back. Chris Evans is returning as Steve Rogers, the original Captain America. This was confirmed in the first Doomsday teaser, which showed Steve in his house, holding a baby. The Russo brothers have been very specific about Steve's importance to this story. Anthony Russo told Empire magazine that they have a special affinity with the character, and they cannot see this narrative without his central role in it. Now, the last time we saw Steve Rogers, he had traveled back in time at the end of Endgame to return the Infinity Stones, and then chose to stay in the past to live out his life with Peggy Carter. He appeared at the end of the film as an elderly man, passing his shield to Sam. So the question is, which Steve is this? Is this the young Steve from before his time travel trip? Is this a Steve who has been living in an alternate timeline with Peggy? Has Haley Atwell been confirmed to reprise Agent Carter, which would support that theory? The answer to that last question is yes. Haley Atwell is confirmed for the film. So it seems likely that this Steve is the one who went back in time and has been living with Peggy, raising a family, and will be pulled back into the fight when doom threatens reality itself. Next, the Fantastic Four. Pedro Pascal plays Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, a genius scientist who can stretch any part of his body to extraordinary lengths. Vanessa Kirby plays Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, who can generate force fields and turn invisible. Joseph Quinn plays Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, who can ignite his body in flames and fly. And Eben Moss-Backrack plays Ben Grimm, the Thing, a man transformed into a being of incredible rocky strength. These four are coming from the events of the Fantastic Four First Steps, where they exist on Earth 828, a separate universe from the main MCU timeline. In that film, they defeated Galactus, but their post-credits scene showed Dr. Doom appearing in the Baxter Building to visit young Franklin Richards, their son, with cosmic-level powers. This suggests the Fantastic Four have crossed over to Earth 616, the main MCU timeline, likely fleeing the consequences of their own universe's instability. The new Avengers and Thunderbolts represent the ground-level heroes. Sebastian Stan returns as Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, who is described as the de facto leader of the new Avengers. Florence Pugh returns as Yelena Belova, the new Black Widow. David Harbour returns as Alexei Shostakov, the Red Guardian. Wyatt Russell returns as John Walker, the U.S. agent. Lewis Pullman plays Bob Reynolds, the Sentry, an incredibly powerful but psychologically unstable superhuman who was introduced in Thunderbolts. And Hannah John Kamen returns as Ava Starr, Ghost. These are the characters from Thunderbolts, a film about broken, damaged people who found purpose and family in each other. They are not traditional heroes. They are messy, complicated, and deeply human. And they are going to be thrown into a conflict that makes everything they have faced before look like a warm-up. Wakanda brings its own formidable presence. Letitia Wright returns as Shuri, the Black Panther, who took up her brother's mantle in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Wakanda is one of the most technologically advanced nations on Earth, with vibranium-enhanced weapons, armor, and warriors. And Tenoch Huerta returns as Namor, the ruler of Talokan, the underwater civilization that clashed with Wakanda before eventually forming an uneasy alliance. Namor is an incredibly powerful character, one of the oldest in Marvel Comics history, and his presence in Doomsday suggests that the conflict will have global and even interdimensional stakes. Winston Duke returns as M'Baku, the leader of the Jabari tribe and one of Wakanda's most formidable warriors. And then, we get to what might be the most exciting team in the entire film, the X-Men. For the first time in MCU history, the original X-Men from the Fox film series are crossing over into the main Marvel Cinematic Universe. Patrick Stewart returns as Professor Charles Xavier, the world's most powerful telepath and leader of the mutant team. Ian McKellen returns as Eric Lensher, Magneto, the master of magnetism. James Marsden returns as Scott Summers, Cyclops. Rebecca Romijn returns as Mystique. Kelsey Grammer returns as Hank McCoy, Beast. Alan Cumming returns as Kurt Wagner, Nightcrawler. And Channing Tatum returns as Remy LeBeau, Gambit, having first played the role in Deadpool and Wolverine. Tatum noted in interviews that the Russo brothers wanted a more dramatic and serious tone for Doomsday, so he would not be going full Cajun with the accent this time around. The inclusion of the Fox X-Men is massive. These are characters that audiences have loved since the year 2000, when the original X-Men film essentially launched the modern superhero movie era. Bringing them into the MCU alongside the Avengers and the Fantastic Four is something fans have dreamed about for decades, and the fact that they are reportedly arriving from a universe that is being destroyed by incursions makes their situation even more desperate and compelling. Tom Hiddleston returns as Loki. This is significant because, as we discussed, Loki is currently sitting at the end of time holding the multiverse together. His inclusion in the cast suggests that Doom will find a way to reach him, which is terrifying given the theories about what Doom plans to do. Paul Rudd returns as Scott Lang, Ant-Man. Simu Liu returns as Shang-Chi. And while not yet officially confirmed at the time of this recording, Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine are widely expected to appear, given the events of Deadpool and Wolverine and the leaked plot details suggesting their involvement in the opening sequence. The film reportedly features over 35 A-list actors The production budget has been rumored at approximately $1 billion, though Disney has not officially confirmed that figure. If accurate, it would make Avengers Doomsday the most expensive film ever produced. A significant portion of that budget, reportedly around $250 million, is being allocated to cast salaries alone. Fun fact about the production: the Russo brothers have been extraordinarily protective of the film's secrets. Joe Russo told Collider that they have strategized to be effective at preventing leaks, with filming done almost entirely in sound stages at Pinewood to prevent photographs from getting out. Anthony Russo added that even the location work was chosen with secrecy in mind. When you are making a film with this many characters and this many surprises, keeping the plot under wraps is an enormous challenge. And yet, remarkably, the core story details have remained largely secret. What we do have are rumors, leaks of varying reliability, and a lot of very educated guesswork from fans and journalists. Which brings us to the part of the evening that I have been most looking forward to: the theories. What is actually going to happen in Avengers Doomsday? What is Doom's plan? How does the multiverse break? And who is going to pay the ultimate price? Let us dig in. Now, before we dive into the specific theories, I want to set some expectations. Marvel has not confirmed any plot details for Avengers Doomsday. The studio has been remarkably tight-lipped, and the Russo brothers have gone to extraordinary lengths to keep the story secret. What we have are rumored leaks of varying reliability, speculation from well-connected journalists and insiders, and a lot of very smart analysis from fans who have been piecing together clues from the teasers, the cast list, and the events of recent MCU films. Some of what I am about to discuss could turn out to be completely accurate. Some of it could be wildly wrong. And honestly, that is part of the fun, the joy of speculating about these films, of trying to figure out the puzzle before it is revealed, is one of the great pleasures of being a Marvel fan. So take everything with a healthy grain of salt, enjoy the theories for what they are, and let us see how much we can figure out. Let us start with the opening of the film, because if the rumors are accurate, Doomsday begins with one of the most devastating sequences in MCU history. According to multiple leaked plot details that have been ranked as highly probable by outlets like comicbook.com and comicbookmovie.com, Avengers Doomsday opens with an incursion, not a theoretical one, not a warning about what might happen, an actual incursion happening in real time, destroying an entire universe before the title card even appears. And the universe being destroyed is one that audiences know and love. It is the universe of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, the world of Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. Think about that for a moment. The film reportedly opens with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man desperately trying to save his world as reality collapses around him. Buildings crumble, the sky tears apart, everything he has ever known is being annihilated, and he cannot stop it. According to the leaks, Deadpool and Wolverine are also present in this sequence, having been sent to this universe by Beast with a device designed to destroy the world, similar to the way the TVA prunes timelines. Wolverine sets the device and stays behind, dying alongside Maguire's Spider-Man as the universe is consumed. If this is true, it is an absolutely brutal way to open the film. It immediately establishes the stakes at the highest possible level. Entire universes are dying. Beloved characters are being killed. There is no safety net, and it draws a direct line from the events of Deadpool and Wolverine, where we learned about anchor beings and dying universes, to the existential threat of Doomsday. The message is clear from the first frame. This is not a normal superhero movie. This is the end of everything. The emotional weight of watching Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man die would be staggering. This is a character that an entire generation grew up with. The original live-action Spider-Man. The one who taught us that, with great power comes great responsibility. To see him fighting and failing to save his world, to watch his universe end despite everything he has given, would set a tone of genuine grief and urgency that would carry through the entire film. Now, let us talk about Doom's master plan, because this is where the theories get really intricate and fascinating. The most widely discussed theory about Doom's strategy involves a systematic dismantling of the structures holding the multiverse together. Remember, the multiverse is currently being held stable by Loki, who sits at the end of time holding every branching timeline together through his sacrifice. The TVA, even without He Who Remains, still exists as an organization that monitors and manages multiversal threats, and the various anchor beings across different universes provide individual stability to their respective realities. According to the rumored plot details, Doom's plan involves attacking all three of these pillars. He is not just trying to conquer one universe, he is trying to gain control of the entire multiverse. And to do that, he needs to remove every safeguard that is keeping reality from collapsing. The theory goes like this: Doom is aware of the incursions that are beginning to cascade across the multiverse. Universes are starting to collide, Earths are on a collision course, and the boundary between realities is breaking down. Most people see this as a catastrophe to be prevented. Doom sees it as an opportunity. If he can control the collapse, if he can position himself as the one who picks up the pieces after everything falls apart, then he can rebuild reality in his own image. To do this, Doom first needs to neutralize the TVA. The Time Variance Authority is the only organization with the infrastructure and the technology to monitor and potentially prevent incursions across the multiverse. As long as the TVA exists, there are people watching, people who might intervene, people who might figure out what Doom is doing and try to stop him. So the TVA has to go. According to one of the more detailed leaks, Doom acquires Cerebro, the powerful mutant detection device used by Professor Xavier's X-Men. But instead of using it to find mutants, Doom modifies it into a multiversal tracker, a device capable of locating specific individuals across the infinite expanse of parallel realities. And the individual he is tracking is Loki. Doom traces Loki's path through the multiverse, following the trail of his power all the way to the TVA and then beyond it, to the end of time, where Loki sits on his throne of dying branches, and then Doom attacks. He infiltrates the TVA, overwhelms its defenses, and makes his way to Loki. According to the most dramatic version of this leak, Doom rips out Loki's heart, killing the god who has been holding the multiverse together and stealing his powers in the process. If this is true, it is the single most consequential villain action in MCU history. By killing Loki, Doom does not just kill a beloved character, he removes the anchor of the entire multiverse. Every branch of reality that Loki was holding together begins to unravel simultaneously. Incursions cascade out of control. Universes start colliding at an accelerating rate. The multiverse is dying, and Doom has just stolen the only power that was keeping it alive. With Loki's abilities absorbed into himself, Doom now possesses the power to manipulate reality on a cosmic scale. He can reshape timelines, create and destroy worlds, bend the fabric of existence to his will. He has essentially made himself a god, which is, of course, exactly what Doom has always wanted to be. Now, there is another layer to this theory that makes it even more interesting. Before Doom reveals his true nature, before the heroes understand what he is really doing, Doom apparently presents himself as an ally. According to the leaked plot details, there is a period in the film where Dr. Doom and Reed Richards form an uneasy alliance. The incursions are happening, universes are colliding, and the heroes are desperate for a solution. Doom, presenting himself as a fellow genius who wants to save reality, proposes a plan. He and Reed will build massive devices, essentially cannons, that can be placed on the remaining Earths across the multiverse. These devices would theoretically separate the colliding realities and end the incursions by pushing the universes apart. The heroes, desperate and out of options, agree to the plan. They split into teams and travel to different worlds to place the devices. This creates the middle act of the film, a multiverse-hopping adventure where different teams of heroes visit different realities, encounter different threats, and work toward what they believe is a shared goal. Some teams might visit the X-Men's world. Others might encounter entirely new realities we have never seen before. The scope would be enormous. But here is the twist. Doom was never trying to save the multiverse. The devices he built with Reed are not designed to push universes apart. They are part of his larger plan to control the collapse. Doom has been manipulating everyone from the beginning. His alliance with Reed was a deception, a way to position his technology across multiple realities simultaneously. When Doom activates his true plan, the heroes realize they have been helping the villain all along, and by then, it is too late. This is classic Dr. Doom. In the comics, Doom's greatest weapon has never been his armor or his sorcery. It is his mind. He outthinks everyone. He plans 20 steps ahead. He manipulates heroes and villains alike, using their own strengths and weaknesses against them. The idea that he would fool Reed Richards, the smartest man in the MCU, into helping him destroy the multiverse is exactly the kind of thing Doom would do. And it would be a devastating moment for Reed, who would have to reckon with the fact that his own genius was used against everything he was trying to protect. Now, let us talk about one of the most exciting, rumored elements of the film: the battle between the Avengers and the X-Men. When Earth 616's heroes arrive on the X-Men's world seeking help and information about the incursions, they are not welcomed with open arms. The X-Men have already survived multiple incursions. They have watched other universes die. They have fought and lost and fought again. They are suspicious, hostile, and desperate, and when a group of strangers from another universe shows up on their doorstep asking for cooperation, the X-Men's first instinct is not trust, it is survival. A battle breaks out, the Avengers versus the X-Men, Captain America facing off against Cyclops, Thor clashing with Magneto, Black Panther fighting Beast. The matchups alone are enough to make any comic book fan's head spin. This is a crossover that readers have fantasized about for decades. Avengers vs. X-Men was a massive comic book event in 2012, and seeing it realized on screen with this cast would be extraordinary. But according to the leaks, the Avengers vs. X-Men battle is actually a smaller part of the film than you might expect. It is a skirmish born of fear and misunderstanding, not a prolonged war. The two teams eventually realize they are on the same side, that the real enemy is Doom, and that fighting each other only serves his interests. This is a pattern we have seen in the MCU before. Think of Thor meeting the Guardians of the Galaxy in Infinity War, or the airport battle in Civil War. Heroes clash before uniting. Conflict precedes cooperation, and the eventual alliance between the Avengers and the X-Men, born from mutual recognition that they face the same threat, would be one of the most cathartic moments in the entire film. There is also the matter of Beast, and this is where the theories get particularly dark. According to the leaked details, Beast takes on a morally compromised role in the film. He is described as going properly comic book dark, willing to do dark deeds in the name of survival. In the comics, Beast has a history of crossing ethical lines when he believes the ends justify the means. He has experimented on himself, made morally questionable alliances, and sometimes become the very thing he was supposed to fight against. The idea that the MCU's Beast, played by Kelsey Grammer, would take a darker turn adds a layer of moral complexity to the X-Men's involvement. Not every hero fights clean. Not every decision is noble. And in a story about the end of the multiverse, the line between heroism and desperation gets very blurry. Now let us talk about the end game. No pun intended. Well, maybe a little pun intended. The final act of Avengers Doomsday is where everything comes together, and where, if the theories are correct, the heroes suffer their most devastating defeat since Thanos snapped his fingers. According to the rumored plot details, the final battle takes place in Latveria, Doom's homeland, his fortress, the seat of his power. The heroes have finally discovered Doom's true nature. They know he is the one causing the incursions, or at least accelerating them. They know he has been manipulating them, and they assemble their forces for one massive assault on Latveria, hoping to stop Doom before he can complete his plan. The scope of this battle would be unlike anything we have seen in the MCU. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, the Thunderbolts, the Warriors of Wakanda, the forces of Talokan, all converging on a single location. Every hero, every team, every ability, thrown at one man and his army. If the endgame portal scene made you emotional, imagine that multiplied by the inclusion of the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and characters from across the multiverse. There is a specific detail in the leaked plot that I find incredibly moving. Thor, facing what may be his final battle, prays to his father Odin. The leaked text from IMDb shows Thor saying something along the lines of, "Father, all my life I have answered every call, to honor, to duty, to war. Now fate has given me something I never sought, a child, a life untouched by the storm. Lend me the strength of the All-Fathers, so that I might fight once more, defeat one more enemy, and return home to her, not as a warrior, but as warmth, to teach her not battle, but stillness, the kind I never knew. That is devastating." Thor, who has lost everything multiple times over, his mother in the Dark World, his father in Ragnarok, his brother in Infinity War, his people scattered across the galaxy, has finally found something worth living for. A child, a quiet life, and now he has to risk it all one more time. The prayer to Odin is not a request for victory. It is a request to come home. That emotional grounding is what separates the Russo's Avengers films from everything else. They never forget that these characters are people with lives and loves and fears, not just action figures smashing into each other. According to the theory, Odin answers Thor's prayer by sending an army from Valhalla to join the battle. This is a concept rooted in Norse mythology, where the warriors of Valhalla ride out alongside the gods during Ragnarok, the final battle. The image of ghostly Asgardian warriors descending from the heavens to fight alongside Thor would be visually spectacular and emotionally powerful, especially if those warriors include characters we have lost. Heimdall, Frigga, the Warriors 3, maybe even a version of Loki, fighting one last time beside his brother. But here is where the theory takes its darkest turn. Despite the assembled might of every hero in the multiverse, the final battle is not a victory, it is a defeat. Doomsday is, after all, the first part of a two-part story, mirroring the structure of Infinity War and Endgame. In Infinity War, the heroes fought valiantly and lost. Thanos snapped his fingers, and half of all life in the universe ceased to exist. Doomsday, according to the theories, follows the same pattern. The heroes fight. They give everything they have, but it is not enough. The final incursion begins. Not a single collision between two universes, but a cascading chain reaction that threatens to destroy everything simultaneously. While the battle rages in Latveria, reality itself begins to unravel. The sky cracks, the ground splits, different universes bleed into each other, and Doom, at the center of it all, holds the stolen power of Loki in his hands. Everything is destroyed. That is what the leaked plot details say. Everything is destroyed, apart from Doom. The Avengers, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Warriors of Wakanda and Valhalla, all of them are consumed by the final incursion. Every universe, every timeline, every reality collapses into nothing. The multiverse dies, and from the ashes, Doom builds something new, using Loki's stolen powers, the same abilities that Loki used to hold the multiverse together. Doom creates Battleworld. He takes the fragments of destroyed realities, the shattered remnants of dead universes, and he stitches them together into a single patchwork world. He resurrects the fallen heroes, but he erases their memories. They wake up on Battleworld with no recollection of who they were, no memory of the multiverse, no knowledge that they once fought against Doom. They only know this new reality, the one that Doom created, the one where Doom is God. If this is how Doomsday ends, it would be the most devastating conclusion to a Marvel film since Infinity War. Actually, it might be worse. In Infinity War, the heroes lost, but they still existed. They could still fight. Half the universe was dusted, but the other half survived and could plan a counteroffensive. In Doomsday, according to this theory, the heroes do not just lose, they cease to be themselves. They are alive, but they are not the people we know. Their memories, their identities, their relationships, all of it is erased by Doom's power. They exist only as Doom allows them to exist. That is genuinely terrifying. And it is the perfect setup for Avengers Secret Wars, which would then be about the heroes slowly remembering who they are, piecing together their true identities, and rising up against God Emperor Doom. But we will get to that later. Now, there is one more theory I want to discuss before we move on, and it is one that has been debated endlessly since the moment Robert Downey Jr. was cast as Dr. Doom. The question is simple. Is this version of Doom actually a variant of Tony Stark? The theory goes like this. In the infinite multiverse, there are infinite variations of every person. We have seen this with Loki, who has variants that range from an alligator to a female version of himself. The theory suggests that somewhere in the multiverse, there is a version of the man we know as Tony Stark, who was born not in New York, but in Latveria. Not as a billionaire inventor, but as a Romani boy who lost his parents to tragedy. Not as Iron Man, but as Dr. Doom. This theory has a certain elegant logic to it. It would explain why Marvel cast Robert Downey Jr. in the role. It would create a thematic mirror between Tony Stark, the hero who saved the universe, and Victor Von Doom, the villain who destroyed it. Same face, same intelligence, opposite choices, opposite paths. But I have to be honest, I do not think this theory is correct, and here is why. The Russo brothers and the MCU have gone out of their way to establish Doom as Victor Von Doom, a separate character with his own origin and his own identity. Joe Russo described Doom as one of the most complex comic book characters, using language that clearly refers to the established Victor Von Doom from the comics. not a reimagined version of Tony Stark. The Fantastic Four First Steps post-credits scene shows Doom visiting Franklin Richards at the Baxter Building, behaving in a way that is consistent with the comics version of Doom, not a Stark variant. And frankly, making Doom a Stark variant would diminish the character. Part of what makes Dr. Doom so compelling in the comics is that he is entirely his own person. His rivalry with Reed Richards, his Romani heritage, his mastery of both science and sorcery, his complicated relationship with his homeland of Latveria, none of that works if he is secretly just Tony Stark wearing a different mask. Doom deserves to be Doom. He has earned that distinction through 60 years of extraordinary storytelling. That said, I understand why the theory exists. Robert Downey Jr. was Tony Stark for over a decade. It is natural for audiences to see his face and think of Tony, and maybe the film will play with that expectation. Maybe there will be a moment where the heroes look at Doom and see a face they recognize, and that recognition becomes part of the story. But I believe that when the mask comes off, we will be looking at Victor Von Doom, not Tony Stark. And I think that is the right choice. There is one more fascinating angle to the Doom theories that I think deserves attention, and it involves the Fantastic Four's son, Franklin Richards. In First Steps, Franklin demonstrated cosmic-level powers. As a baby, he used the power cosmic to resurrect his own mother from death. He is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, potentially capable of creating and destroying entire realities. And Doom visited him in the post-credits scene. Some fans believe that Franklin is central to Doom's plan, that Doom does not just want to control the multiverse through Loki's stolen powers, but that he also needs Franklin's cosmic abilities to reshape reality on a fundamental level. Franklin could be the key to creating Battleworld, the source of power that Doom needs to build his new world from the fragments of the old one. If this is true, then the Fantastic Four's involvement in Doomsday is not just about saving the multiverse, it is about saving their son from the most dangerous man in existence. This would also create a beautiful thematic parallel. In the comics, Doom's deepest wound is the loss of his mother. His entire journey, from orphaned boy to armored tyrant, has been driven by the desperate desire to save her soul from a demon. If the MCU's Doom is motivated in part by a desire to acquire Franklin, a child of cosmic power, it creates a mirror between Doom's loss and the Fantastic Four's fear. Doom lost a mother. The Fantastic Four fear losing a son. Both are driven by love, twisted in different directions by the choices they make. Fun fact that I think is really interesting. In the original Secret Wars comic from 2015, when Doom became God Emperor and created Battleworld, one of the things he did was take Sue Storm as his wife and Franklin and Valeria Richards as his children. He literally stole Reed Richards' family. It was the ultimate expression of his rivalry with Reed, not just proving himself intellectually superior, but taking everything Reed loved. If the MCU goes in a similar direction, the emotional stakes for the Fantastic Four would be enormous. All of these theories, the incursion opening, the TVA assault, the Reed alliance and betrayal, the Avengers versus X-Men, the war in Latveria, the final incursion, and the creation of Battleworld paint a picture of a film that is genuinely apocalyptic in scope. This is not a story about saving a city or even a planet. This is a story about saving reality itself. And it is a story where the heroes lose. But losing is not the end. It never is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The question is not whether the heroes will eventually win. The question is what they will have to sacrifice along the way. And that brings us to the topic that no one wants to talk about, but everyone is thinking about: who is going to die. Now, I want to be gentle with this section, because I know some of you listening tonight have been with these characters for a long time. Some of us have been watching the MCU since 2008. That is 18 years of stories, of growing up with these heroes, of seeing them triumph and fail and grow and change. So talking about which of them might die is not something I take lightly. But the Russo brothers have been very clear that Avengers Doomsday is going to have real consequences. And in a story about the end of the multiverse, real consequences means real loss. Every Avengers film has raised the stakes. In the first Avengers, the cost was Phil Coulson's life and the destruction of parts of Manhattan. In Age of Ultron, it was the devastation of Sokovia and the psychological damage inflicted on the team. In Infinity War, it was half of all life in the universe. In Endgame, it was Tony Stark and Natasha Romanoff, two founding Avengers who gave their lives to save everyone else. Doomsday needs to match or exceed that level of emotional devastation, and according to the theories, it does. Multiple characters are at risk. Let us talk about who and why. Loki is almost certainly a casualty of Doomsday. If the theory about Doom attacking the TVA and stealing Loki's powers is correct, then the God of Mischief story ends here. And honestly, while that would be heartbreaking, it would also be a fitting conclusion to one of the most extraordinary character arcs in the MCU. Loki started as a villain in the first Avengers film, envious, petty, and desperate for power. Over the course of multiple films and 2 seasons of his own show, he transformed into something far more complex. He became someone who understood that true greatness is not about power or glory, but about the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. Loki's sacrifice at the end of Season 2, choosing to hold the multiverse together alone and forever, was already one of the most selfless acts in MCU history. If Doom kills Loki and steals that sacrifice, it adds a layer of tragedy that is almost unbearable. Loki gave everything to save the multiverse, and Doom takes it from him. The hero's greatest gift, weaponized by the villain. Tom Hiddleston has played this character for over 15 years, and if this is how Loki's story ends, it will be devastating. But it will also be meaningful, which is what matters. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, as we discussed, may die in the opening incursion sequence. Hugh Jackman's Wolverine may also fall in that same sequence. These would be enormous emotional moments, particularly for fans who grew up with these versions of the characters. Maguire's Spider-Man was the first big-screen superhero for millions of people. Jackman has played Wolverine for over 25 years. Losing both of them in the opening minutes would be a statement of intent from the filmmakers. No one is safe. Nothing is sacred. This story is going to hurt. But the character I am most worried about, the one whose potential death keeps me up at night, is Thor. Chris Hemsworth has played the God of Thunder since 2011. He has been through more personal loss than almost any other character in the MCU. His mother Frigga died in the Dark World. His father Odin died in Ragnarok. His brother Loki was killed by Thanos in the opening of Infinity War. His homeworld of Asgard was destroyed. His people were scattered across the galaxy. He failed to stop Thanos in Infinity War because he went for the chest instead of the head, and that failure contributed to the death of half the universe. And through all of that loss, Thor kept going. He kept fighting. He found reasons to live. In Love and Thunder, he found a daughter, a child to raise and protect. The Doomsday teasers show him as a father, gentle and domestic. And then the prayer to Odin, asking for the strength to fight one more time and come home. That prayer is either a promise of survival or a prelude to tragedy. And I am genuinely not sure which. If Thor dies in Doomsday, it would be the end of an era. He is the last of the original Big Three. Tony Stark is dead. Steve Rogers retired and grew old. Thor is the only founding Avenger who is still actively fighting. His death would represent the final closing of the original chapter, the absolute end of the Infinity Saga's legacy. But here is why I think there is hope for Thor. The fact that he has a daughter, a child who needs him, feels like a narrative reason for him to survive. The storytelling principle of giving a character something to lose usually means the story is about whether they can keep it, not about losing it automatically. If Thor's arc in Doomsday is about fighting to return home to his child, then the satisfying conclusion is that he does return, changed, battered, scarred, but alive, a warrior who finally gets to put down his weapons and just be a father. That said, I could be completely wrong. The Russos have shown repeatedly that they are willing to kill beloved characters when the story demands it. Tony Stark's death in Endgame was not arbitrary. It was the perfect conclusion to his arc, a selfish man who learned to sacrifice everything for others. If Thor's death serves the story in a similar way, if it is not gratuitous but meaningful, then the Russos will not hesitate. Steve Rogers is another question mark. Chris Evans is back, confirmed to have a central role. But what does central mean? Does it mean he survives and leads the charge into Secret Wars? Or does it mean he has one final defining moment and then passes the torch permanently? The teasers show Steve with a baby, living a quiet, domestic life. The story seems to be about pulling him out of that life for one last mission. And one last mission stories often end with the hero not coming home. But I think Steve survives Doomsday. His arc is too important to end in the first half of a two-part story. If Steve is going to go out, it will be in Secret Wars, in the climactic final battle against Doom. Endgame gave Steve a peaceful ending. Doomsday and Secret Wars could give him a heroic one. The two are not mutually exclusive. He got his dance with Peggy. Now he gets his final stand. The Fantastic Four are probably safe for Doomsday, since they have only just been introduced to the MCU, and killing them off immediately would be narratively wasteful. But they are going to suffer. If Doom takes their son, if Franklin is part of Doom's plan, then the Fantastic Four will face the most personal stakes of anyone in the film. Their struggle will not just be about saving the multiverse, it will be about saving their family. The Thunderbolts are interesting because several of them are relatively new characters who the audience has not had as much time to bond with. That makes them more expendable from a narrative standpoint, which makes them more likely candidates for sacrifice. John Walker, in particular, feels like a character who could have a redemptive death, giving his life to protect others after years of moral ambiguity. Yelena Belova is probably safe because Marvel clearly has plans for her going forward. Bucky Barnes could go either way. Sebastian Stan has been in the MCU since the first Avenger in 2011, and his arc from brainwashed assassin to redeemed hero is largely complete. The X-Men present an interesting situation because they are essentially guest stars from another franchise. Patrick Stewart's Professor Xavier, Ian McKellen's Magneto, and the other Fox X-Men actors are not going to be carrying the MCU forward. They are here for this event. That means some of them could die without creating long-term narrative problems for Marvel. In fact, the heroic sacrifice of a character like Magneto, a villain turned reluctant hero, defending the multiverse alongside his oldest enemies, would be a powerful way to honor the legacy of the Fox X-Men films. I think the death count in Doomsday will be significant but complicated by the Battleworld twist. If Doom resurrects the fallen and erases their memories, then the characters who die in the final incursion are not permanently dead. They are alive on Battleworld, but they are not themselves. They do not remember their friends, their loves, and their identities. In a way, that is worse than death. They exist, but they are not the people we knew, and Secret Wars would then be about getting those people back. Here is what I think the Doomsday death toll looks like, and please remember, this is pure speculation. Loki dies permanently, his powers stolen by Doom. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and possibly Hugh Jackman's Wolverine die in the opening incursion. 1 or 2 X-Men die in the Latveria battle. 1 Thunderbolts member, probably Walker or Bucky, makes a heroic sacrifice, and then the final incursion kills everyone else, but they are resurrected on Battleworld with no memories, setting up Secret Wars. If I am right about that, Doomsday will be an absolute gut punch. The heroes fight with everything they have, and they still lose. They die, and then they are brought back as strangers in a world that Doom controls. It is the ultimate expression of Doom's philosophy. He does not just want to defeat his enemies, he wants to remake them. He wants to prove that his vision of reality is superior, that his order is better than their freedom, that his world is better than theirs. And honestly, in a twisted way, Doom might be partially right. Battleworld, in the comics, was not a dystopia in the traditional sense. People had lives, they had jobs and families and communities. They existed in relative peace and stability. The only thing they did not have was freedom. The only thing they did not have was truth. And the central question of Secret Wars is whether truth and freedom are worth fighting for, even when the alternative is a comfortable lie. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before we talk about Secret Wars, let us take a moment to understand how Doomsday bridges the gap between the two films, because the connection between them is essential to understanding the full scope of what Marvel is attempting here. Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars are being produced together. The Russo brothers have been clear about this. They compared the relationship between the two films to Infinity War and Endgame, which were produced in a similar fashion. However, unlike Infinity War and Endgame, which were filmed back-to-back, Doomsday and Secret Wars are not being filmed simultaneously. They are separate productions, but they share the same creative team, the same vision, and the same overarching story. The Russos direct both films. Stephen McFeely and Michael Waldron wrote both screenplays. Alan Silvestri, who composed the iconic scores for Infinity War and Endgame, the themes that made audiences cry and cheer and feel things they did not know blockbuster movies could make them feel, is returning to compose the music for both Doomsday and Secret Wars. This is not a coincidence. Marvel wants these films to feel like a cohesive pair, a 2-part conclusion to the Multiverse Saga that mirrors the 2-part conclusion of the Infinity Saga. Doomsday releases December 18th, 2026. Secret Wars releases December 17th, 2027. Exactly 1 year apart. That gap is significant. It is long enough for the audience to sit with the devastation of Doomsday, to process the loss and the defeat, to theorize and speculate about how the heroes could possibly recover. And then Secret Wars arrives to provide the answer. So how does Doomsday set up Secret Wars? If the theories are correct, the answer lies in Battleworld. In the comics, Battleworld was Dr. Doom's masterpiece. After the final incursion destroyed the multiverse, Doom used the stolen power of the Beyonders to preserve fragments of dead realities and stitch them together into a single patchwork planet. Battleworld was divided into domains, each one a shard of a different destroyed universe. There was a domain that resembled medieval Europe, one that was a zombie wasteland, one that was a version of New York stuck in the era of the Marvel Civil War, one that was a dystopian future ruled by Ultron. Each domain had its own rules, its own history, its own version of familiar characters. And Doom ruled over all of it as God Emperor. The people of Battleworld did not know their world was artificial. They did not remember the multiverse. They did not know that they were fragments of destroyed realities, reassembled by a tyrant who had declared himself divine. They lived their lives believing Battleworld was the only world that had ever existed, that Doom had always been God, that their memories, their relationships, their identities were real. And then cracks began to appear. People started remembering things that did not fit, having dreams of other lives, other worlds, other versions of themselves. The truth, suppressed by Doom's power, began to bleed through the cracks. And slowly, painfully, the heroes began to wake up. They began to remember who they were. They began to resist. If the MCU follows this template, and all signs suggest it will, then Secret Wars will open on Battleworld. We will see familiar characters living unfamiliar lives. Steve Rogers might be a soldier in some eternal war with no memory of being Captain America. Thor might be a blacksmith who does not know he is a god. Spider-Man might be a kid in a strange city who keeps having dreams about swinging between buildings. The X-Men might be living in a domain where mutants are persecuted, unaware that they were once heroes. The Fantastic Four might be a family who does not know they have cosmic powers, and gradually, through the course of the film, they will remember. Something will trigger the awakening, maybe a phrase, maybe a face, maybe a symbol, a shield or a hammer or a mask that unlocks a flood of buried memories. And when they remember, when they understand what Doom has done, what he has taken from them, the rage and the determination to take it back will be unstoppable. Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, has said that Secret Wars will effectively reset the MCU. He used the word reset, though he was quick to clarify that reboot is a scary word. What he means, most likely, is that after the multiverse collapses and Battleworld is eventually undone, the MCU will be reconstituted into a singular timeline. One world, one reality, but a reality that now contains everyone: the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Deadpool, every character from every franchise living in the same universe for the first time. This is the real genius of the Doomsday and Secret Wars storyline. It is not just an epic crossover event, it is a mechanism for restructuring the entire MCU. For the past several phases, Marvel has been juggling multiple timelines, parallel universes, and complex multiverse logic. It has been confusing for casual viewers and challenging even for dedicated fans. Secret Wars offers a clean solution. Collapse the multiverse. Let Doom rebuild it wrong. Let the heroes fix it and rebuild it right. And when the dust settles, you have a fresh starting point, a unified MCU where everyone exists in the same world with shared history and shared purpose. That is an extraordinary storytelling opportunity. It allows Marvel to retire characters whose actors are ready to move on. It allows them to introduce new versions of characters with new actors. It allows them to keep the characters and storylines that are working while gracefully ending the ones that have run their course. It is, in essence, a soft reboot that honors everything that came before while creating space for everything that comes after. And Dr. Doom, the villain who destroyed the multiverse and rebuilt it in his own image, becomes the catalyst for all of it. His defeat in Secret Wars does not just save the heroes, it saves the franchise. It creates the narrative clean slate that Marvel needs to tell another 20 years of stories. That is why Doctor Doom matters so much. That is why his casting, his story, and his eventual defeat need to be done perfectly. The Russo brothers understand this. Stephen McFeely understands this. They made Infinity War and Endgame the most successful two-part story in cinema history. They know how to build to a devastating climax and then deliver a cathartic resolution. Doomsday is the devastation. Secret Wars is the resolution. And if they pull it off, these two films together could surpass Infinity War and Endgame as the greatest event in blockbuster filmmaking. Fun fact about the production timeline. Doomsday wrapped filming in September 2025, and additional photography is expected in early 2026. Secret Wars will presumably begin principal photography sometime in late 2026 or early 2027, giving the team a tight but manageable schedule to deliver the sequel by December 2027. Jeffrey Ford, who edited several previous MCU films, including Endgame, is editing Doomsday, ensuring continuity of style and pacing with the earlier Avengers films. There is also the question of how Doomsday will compete at the box office. The film is scheduled to open on December 18, 2026, which is the same day as Dune Part 3, Denis Villeneuve's conclusion to his epic adaptation of Frank Herbert's science fiction masterpiece. Dune has secured exclusive IMAX screens in select markets, which means some fans will not be able to see Doomsday in IMAX on opening weekend. This has drawn comparisons to the Barbenheimer phenomenon of 2023, when Barbie and Oppenheimer opened on the same day and both became massive hits. Some fans have already coined the term Doomsday for the December 2026 clash. It will be fascinating to see how the two films coexist at the box office, though I suspect there is room for both to succeed. But box office numbers are not what I think about when I imagine Doomsday. What I think about is the feeling of sitting in a dark theater, surrounded by other fans, watching the culmination of 18 years of storytelling, watching characters we have grown up with face their greatest challenge, watching Doctor Doom, one of the most iconic villains in fiction, finally brought to life in a way that does justice to his complexity and power, and knowing that whatever happens on screen, we are witnessing something that has never been attempted before in the history of cinema. A crossover event that spans decades of storytelling, dozens of characters, and the entirety of the Marvel multiverse. That is special. And no matter how the theories turn out, no matter which characters live and which ones die, that feeling of shared experience, of collective anticipation and emotional investment is what makes the MCU unique. It is not just movies. It is a story that we are all living through together. But before we start wrapping up for the evening, I want to cover a few more theories, the wilder ones. The ones that are probably wrong but are genuinely fun to think about. And honestly, some of them are so creative that I hope they turn out to be true, even if I doubt they will. So let us talk about the fun stuff. One of the most creatively wild theories I have seen floating around the internet involves the clanking sound at the end of Avengers Endgame. You might remember this. After the credits, after Tony Stark's funeral, after Steve Rogers danced with Peggy Carter, the screen went black, and there was a sound, a metallic clanking, a hammer striking metal. At the time, everyone assumed it was a tribute to Tony Stark building his first Iron Man suit in a cave in 2008, a callback to where it all began, a farewell to the character who started the MCU. But now, with Robert Downey Jr. returning as Doctor Doom, some fans have reinterpreted that sound entirely. What if it was not Tony Stark building his suit? What if it was Victor Von Doom forging his armor? What if, in some hidden corner of the multiverse, At the exact moment Tony Stark's story ended, Doctor Doom's story began. The same sound, the same metallic rhythm, but a completely different meaning. It is almost certainly a coincidence. The Endgame team could not have known in 2019 that Downey would return as Doom years later. But the beauty of shared universes and long-form storytelling is that coincidences can be retroactively given meaning. If the Russos wanted to, they could include a scene in Doomsday that shows Doom forging his armor, with the same clanking sound, creating a deliberate echo of Endgame's final moment. It would be subtle, the kind of thing that only dedicated fans would notice, but it would be incredibly powerful. Then there is the Beyonders theory. In the comics, the incursions were ultimately caused by beings called the Beyonders, omnipotent entities from outside the multiverse who were conducting an experiment in universal destruction. They were essentially toying with reality, destroying universes to see what would happen. Doctor Doom's greatest act was not conquering Battleworld. It was defeating the Beyonders themselves, stealing their power, and using it to save what remained of the multiverse. In a twisted way, Doom was the hero of Secret Wars. He was the only person willing and able to do what needed to be done. Some fans believe the MCU will introduce the Beyonders as a presence behind the incursions, not as the main villains, since Doom fills that role, but as the cosmic force that Doom must eventually confront and overcome. If this happens, it would add another layer to Doom's character. He is not just a conqueror. He is the only person smart enough and powerful enough to face beings that even the Avengers cannot comprehend, and his decision to seize their power and remake reality, while tyrannical, was also an act of cosmic survival. No one else could have done it, and that terrifying truth is part of what makes Doom so compelling. There is also the theory about Doctor Strange. Benedict Cumberbatch confirmed that he was wrong when he initially said Doctor Strange would not appear in the next Avengers movie. This suggests Strange will be in Doomsday in some capacity. In the comics, Strange and Doom have a complicated relationship. They are both masters of the mystic arts. They have fought against each other and alongside each other. In one of the most famous Doom stories, Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange teamed up to rescue Doom's mother's soul from Mephisto's realm. It is entirely possible that Strange plays a crucial role in Doomsday, perhaps as the sorcerer who first detects the incursions, or as the person who discovers Doom's deception, or even as a mystical advisor who helps the heroes understand the cosmic forces at work. And then there is the theory about Namor. Tenoch Huerta is confirmed to return as Namor in Doomsday, which is interesting because Namor has a significant role in the Secret Wars comic storyline. In the comics, Namor was one of the members of the Illuminati who made the impossible choice to destroy other Earths to prevent incursions. He was the one who was willing to do what the others could not. He destroyed an entire world to save his own. And that act haunted him, defined him, and eventually led to his exile from the group. If the MCU gives Namor a similar arc, he could be one of the most morally complex characters in Doomsday. A king who is willing to sacrifice anything, including his own soul, to protect his people. A warrior who understands that sometimes survival requires decisions that are impossible to live with. Namor's inclusion in the film, alongside the Wakandans who were his enemies before becoming his reluctant allies, creates opportunities for deeply personal storytelling within the larger cosmic framework. There is a theory I find particularly fascinating about the structure of the multiverse after Doomsday. Some fans believe that the film will not just end with Battleworld, but will show the creation of Battleworld as a real-time event. That we will see Doom pulling fragments of different universes together, assembling his patchwork world from the pieces of destroyed realities. And in those fragments, we will catch glimpses of worlds we know. A piece of Asgard here, a corner of Wakanda there, the streets of New York from the Raimi Spider-Man films, the Danger Room from the X-Men mansion, the Baxter Building, the TVA's corridors. All of it, broken and rearranged, stitched together into something new and strange and wrong. If the Russos execute this visually, it could be one of the most breathtaking sequences in cinema history. Imagine watching the multiverse collapse, seeing universes that audiences have loved for decades being torn apart, and then watching Doom reassemble them into his own creation. The destruction and creation happening simultaneously. Death and rebirth, ending and beginning, all controlled by one man in an iron mask who believes he is saving the world by destroying it. Let us also talk about some of the supporting characters who might have surprising roles in Doomsday. Paul Rudd's Scott Lang, Ant-Man, is confirmed for the film. Scott has experience with the quantum realm and with time manipulation. In Endgame, it was Scott's idea to use the quantum realm for time travel. In Quantumania, he fought Kang the Conqueror in the quantum realm. His knowledge of subatomic physics and dimensional travel could be crucial in understanding and potentially countering Doom's manipulation of the multiverse. Simu Liu's Shang-Chi brings the power of the Ten Rings, ancient artifacts of incredible power that sent out a signal at the end of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. That signal was detected by Wong, Bruce Banner, and Carol Danvers, suggesting the rings have cosmic significance that has not yet been fully explored. If the Ten Rings are connected to the same cosmic forces that Doom is manipulating, Shang-Chi could play a more important role in Doomsday than people expect. Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova represents the next generation of MCU heroes. She carries the legacy of her sister Natasha, the original Black Widow, who sacrificed herself in Endgame. Yelena's journey from traumatized assassin to reluctant hero mirrors the journey that Natasha took across the Infinity Saga. And if Yelena has to face the same kind of impossible sacrifice that Natasha faced, the emotional weight would be enormous. David Harbour's Red Guardian, Alexei Shostakov, is the comedic heart of the Thunderbolts team. He is a boisterous, somewhat delusional former Soviet super soldier who genuinely believes he once arm-wrestled Captain America. His warmth and humor provide lightness in dark moments, and in a film as heavy and apocalyptic as Doomsday, that lightness is going to be essential. Every great war movie needs moments of laughter and connection to remind us why these characters are worth caring about. There is one more theory I want to touch on before we start winding down, and it involves the concept of memory. In the rumored Battleworld scenario, Doom erases everyone's memories and gives them new identities. But the comics established that memory cannot be fully suppressed. The truth has a way of surfacing through dreams, through déjà vu, through the feeling that something is not right. And in the MCU, we have already seen this concept explored. In WandaVision, Wanda Maximoff created an artificial reality where she and Vision lived a perfect suburban life. But the reality was a prison built on grief and denial, and it could not last because the people inside it kept having moments of awareness, kept sensing that something was wrong. The bubble cracked, the truth bled through, and Wanda had to face the reality she was trying to escape. If Battleworld follows the same pattern, if the heroes on Doom's patchwork world start having dreams of their real lives, start feeling connections to people they do not remember, start questioning why their world feels slightly wrong, then Secret Wars becomes a story about the power of memory and identity, about how even the most powerful force in the universe cannot erase who someone truly is. That theme, the indestructibility of the human spirit, the idea that truth will always find a way to surface, is deeply resonant and deeply human. And it is the kind of theme that the Russos have always excelled at exploring. Let me share a few more fun facts before we wind down, because I think they add some nice texture to everything we have discussed tonight. The Doomsday subtitle and the casting of Robert Downey Jr. were kept secret from almost everyone until the SDCC 2024 reveal. Even some Marvel executives did not know the full plan until shortly before the announcement. The level of secrecy was comparable to the secrecy surrounding Endgame's plot. Dr. Doom first appeared in comics in 1962, which means the character is 64 years old. He has been terrorizing the Marvel Universe for longer than most people have been alive, and in all that time, across thousands of comic book appearances, Doom has never been adapted to live action in a way that truly captured his depth and complexity. The 2005 Fantastic Four film turned him into a corporate villain with electricity powers. The 2015 reboot turned him into a computer programmer who fused with his spacesuit. Neither version came close to the comics. This MCU version, with Robert Downey Jr. in the role and the Russos directing, is the first real chance to get Dr. Doom right, and the pressure to deliver is immense. The Russo brothers took a break from Marvel after Endgame, citing creative burnout from making 4 MCU films, essentially back-to-back from Winter Soldier through Endgame. They made films at Netflix and for their own production company, Agbo. They have said the pitch to introduce Downey as Doom is what reignited their excitement. The creative challenge of building a story around Marvel's greatest villain, with the actor who launched the franchise playing the role, was too compelling to resist. Michael Waldron, who co-wrote the screenplay, is the creator of Loki. He understands the TVA, the multiverse, the temporal loom, and Loki's sacrifice better than almost anyone. Having him involved in writing Doomsday ensures that the connections between Loki's story and Doom's plan will be handled with care and consistency. This is not a case of different writers contradicting each other's mythology. This is the same storyteller following his threads to their conclusion. Alan Silvestri's return as composer might seem like a small detail, but it matters enormously. Music is one of the most powerful tools in cinema. The Avengers theme, first heard in 2012, has become one of the most recognizable pieces of film music in the world. When it plays during the portal scene in Endgame, when every hero emerges from Doctor Strange's golden circles and the theme swells to its full, triumphant power, it is one of the most emotionally overwhelming moments in movie history. Silvestri's return means that Doomsday and Secret Wars will sound like Avengers films. They will have the same musical DNA. And when the moments of triumph or devastation arrive, the music will carry them with the weight of 18 years of accumulated emotion. I think that is part of what makes this entire project so extraordinary. It is not just a movie. It is the culmination of the longest and most successful storytelling experiment in the history of cinema. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been building to this since 2008. Every film, every show, every character, every storyline has been a thread in a tapestry that is finally being completed. Doomsday and Secret Wars are the capstone, the final statement, the moment when everything comes together, and at the center of it all is Dr. Doom, a scarred boy from a Romani camp in Eastern Europe, a genius, a sorcerer, a king, a conqueror, a man who lost his parents, who was rejected by the world, who built himself an iron mask and declared himself above humanity. and who now stands poised to remake the entire multiverse in his own image. That is the story of Avengers Doomsday. And whatever happens when the film arrives in December 2026, it is going to be something none of us will ever forget. Now, before we settle in for the last stretch of the evening, I want to take a step back from the theories and the speculation and just reflect for a moment on what we are actually witnessing here. Because I think sometimes, when you are deep in the details of plot leaks and casting announcements and multiverse mechanics, you can lose sight of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is genuinely extraordinary. The Marvel Cinematic Universe began in 2008 with Iron Man, a film that, at the time, was considered a considerable gamble. Marvel Studios was a fledgling company. Robert Downey Jr. was considered a risky casting choice because of his personal history. The character of Iron Man was not an A-list superhero. He was not Spider-Man or the X-Men or the Hulk. He was a B-list comic book character that most general audiences had never heard of. And yet, somehow, everything clicked. Downey was perfect. The film was perfect. And a universe was born. From that single film, Marvel built something unprecedented. 23 films in the Infinity Saga alone, spanning 11 years, grossing over $22 billion worldwide, and creating a shared narrative universe that connected every story, every character, every theme into a single cohesive tapestry. Nothing like this had ever been attempted before. Nothing like it has been successfully replicated since. Other studios have tried. DC, Universal's Dark Universe, various franchise-building experiments, and none of them have captured the magic that Marvel found. What made the MCU special was never just the spectacle. It was the characters. Tony Stark's journey from selfish arms dealer to self-sacrificing hero. Steve Rogers' struggle to hold on to his ideals in a world that has moved past him. Thor's evolution from arrogant prince to humble protector. Natasha Romanoff's quiet redemption. Bruce Banner's constant battle with the monster inside him. These were not just superheroes. They were people. Complex, flawed, lovable people who made mistakes and learned from them and sometimes failed despite their best efforts. And we cared about them. Deeply, genuinely, in a way that went beyond entertainment and became something closer to emotional investment. I remember watching Infinity War in theaters for the first time. When Thanos snapped his fingers and characters started dissolving into dust, the theater was silent. Not movie silent. Really, truly silent. The kind of silence that happens when hundreds of people simultaneously realize they are watching something devastating and cannot look away. Peter Parker, a teenage boy, looking at Tony Stark and saying, "I do not feel so good," trying to hold himself together, begging Tony not to let him go, and then dissolving into nothing in Tony's arms. That was not a special effect. That was grief. Real, earned, narrative grief built on a decade of storytelling and character development. And then Endgame gave us the catharsis. The portals scene. Captain America finally saying Avengers assemble. Tony Stark snapping his own fingers and saying, "I am Iron Man" one last time. Steve Rogers dancing with Peggy Carter. These moments worked because we had earned them. We had been on the journey. We had seen these characters at their lowest and watched them rise. The payoff was proportional to the investment. Avengers Doomsday has the potential to create similar moments, but on an even larger scale. Because this time, it is not just the original Avengers, it is everyone. Characters from across 20 years of Marvel and Fox filmmaking. The X-Men from the films that launched the modern superhero genre. The Fantastic Four, Marvel's first family, finally joining the MCU. Deadpool and Wolverine. The irreverent outsiders who fought their way into the party. The New Generation, Sam Wilson's Captain America, Yelena's Black Widow, the Thunderbolts, Shang-Chi. All of them standing alongside the originals for the first and possibly last time. The emotional possibilities are staggering. Imagine Steve Rogers and Patrick Stewart's Professor Xavier meeting for the first time. Two men from different worlds, different eras, different struggles, who share the same fundamental belief that people deserve to be protected. Imagine Thor and Magneto, two beings of immense power, one a god and one a mutant, confronting each other in the heat of battle and recognizing a kindred spirit. Imagine Reed Richards and Tony Stark never meeting because Tony is dead, but the audience feeling the absence, knowing that these two geniuses would have been friends or rivals or both. The Russos understand how to create these moments. They understand that the power of a crossover event is not in the spectacle of the fight scenes, but in the connections between the characters. The quiet moment before the battle. The look exchanged between two people who know they might not survive. The joke that breaks the tension. The sacrifice that gives the victory its weight. In Infinity War, the most powerful moment was not the snap. It was Thor arriving on the Wakanda battlefield. The audience in my theater erupted. They cheered. They stood up because they had been waiting for it. They had been watching Thor suffer through the entire film, watching him forge Stormbreaker, watching him prepare for one last desperate strike. And when he arrived, when the Bifrost Bridge opened and Thor descended in a burst of lightning and fury, the crowd noise was unlike anything I have ever experienced in a movie theater. It was not just excitement. It was relief. It was hope. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the heroes were going to win. And then they did not win. And the contrast between that moment of hope and the devastation of the snap was what made Infinity War a masterpiece. Doomsday has the potential for similar moments. Thor arriving in Latveria with an army from Valhalla at his back. Steve Rogers picking up his shield one more time. The X-Men emerging through a portal onto a battlefield they have never seen. The Fantastic Four standing together as a family against a villain who has stolen their son. These moments, if executed with the care and emotional intelligence that the Russos have demonstrated throughout their Marvel career, could be the defining images of this generation of filmmaking. But the Russos also understand that these moments only work if they are earned. If the characters have been given enough screen time, enough development, enough emotional grounding for the audience to care about what happens to them. And that is the challenge of a film with over 35 named characters and a story that spans the entire multiverse. How do you give everyone their moment without the film feeling overstuffed or rushed? How do you balance spectacle with intimacy? The answer, I think, is the same answer the Russos found with Infinity War. You pick your focal points. You choose a handful of characters whose stories will carry the emotional weight of the film, and you let the others orbit around them. In Infinity War, the focal points were Thor, Tony, and Thanos. Everyone else was important, but those three drove the emotional narrative. In Doomsday, I suspect the focal points will be Doom, Steve Rogers, Reed Richards, and possibly Loki or Thor. Doom provides the threat. Steve provides the moral center. Reed provides the intellectual mirror. And Loki or Thor provides the emotional sacrifice. If the Russos can nail those four characters, the rest of the film will fall into place. The supporting characters will have their moments, their battles, their quips, and their sacrifices, but the heart of the story will be carried by a small number of deeply developed, deeply human performances. That is how you make a film with 35 characters feel personal. You do not try to give everyone equal screen time. You try to make every moment of screen time matter. I think that is what I am most looking forward to about Doomsday. Not the spectacle, though I know the spectacle will be incredible. Not the fights, though I know the fights will be epic. What I am looking forward to is the acting. Robert Downey Jr. playing a villain for the first time in his Marvel career. Chris Evans returning as Steve Rogers after 7 years away. Tom Hiddleston potentially in his final performance as Loki, the character he has played longer than almost any other role in his career. Pedro Pascal bringing the warmth and intelligence he showed in The Last of Us to Reed Richards. Patrick Stewart, at 86 years old, putting on Xavier's suit one more time. These are extraordinary performers, and they are being given material that, if the theories are correct, will push them to their limits. Downey playing not a charismatic hero, but a terrifying mastermind. Evans playing a man pulled out of retirement, a father who has to choose between his child and the fate of reality. Hiddleston playing a god who sacrificed everything only to have that sacrifice stolen from him. These are the kinds of performances that transcend the superhero genre. These are the kinds of performances that remind us why we go to the movies in the first place. I also want to mention something about the MCU that I think gets overlooked in all the theorizing about plot and spectacle. The MCU has been one of the great communal experiences of our era. Think about it. How many cultural phenomena have lasted 18 years? How many stories have connected billions of people across every country and every culture on the planet? The MCU is not just American culture. It is global culture. These characters, these stories, they belong to everyone. A kid in Mumbai grew up with Iron Man the same way a kid in Memphis did. A teenager in Lagos loves Black Panther the same way a teenager in London does. Spider-Man means something to people in Tokyo and Sao Paulo and Cairo and everywhere in between. That universality is remarkable, and it is something that Avengers Doomsday has the opportunity to celebrate. By bringing together characters from different franchises, different studios, different eras of filmmaking, the film can represent the global, multi-generational nature of the audience it serves. The X-Men are not just Fox characters. They are the childhood of millions of people who grew up in the 2000s. The Raimi Spider-Man is not just a trilogy. It is a touchstone for an entire generation. Bringing them together with the MCU's Avengers is not just a crossover. It is a reunion. A gathering of stories and characters that have shaped how we think about heroism, sacrifice, and what it means to be good. And Dr. Doom, the villain at the center of it all, represents the dark mirror of everything the MCU has built. Tony Stark used his genius to protect people. Doom uses his genius to control them. The Avengers united despite their differences to save the world. Doom believes only he can save it, and everyone else should bow. The MCU has always been, at its core, about the power of cooperation, of diverse people coming together for a common cause. Doom believes in the power of one mind, one ruler, one vision. The conflict between those philosophies is the conflict of Doomsday, and it is a conflict that resonates far beyond the world of comic books and movies. So that is where we are tonight, standing on the edge of something extraordinary. Avengers Doomsday is 9 months away. The theories are rich, the cast is staggering, and the stakes are higher than they have ever been. Dr. Doom is coming. The multiverse is at risk. And the heroes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are going to face their greatest challenge yet. Whether the theories we discuss tonight turn out to be right or wrong, whether the leaked plot details are accurate or misleading, whether the Russos deliver a masterpiece or stumble under the weight of their ambition, one thing is certain. December 18th, 2026 is going to be a day that none of us forget. A day when 35 of the biggest actors in Hollywood, guided by two of the best blockbuster directors working today, attempt to do something that has never been done before. To tell the final chapter of the greatest shared story in the history of cinema. And I, for one, cannot wait to see what happens. But for now, let us not worry about what comes next. Let us just sit with the stories we have, the characters we love, the theories that keep us up at night, and the speculation that fills our conversations. That is the magic of being a fan, not knowing the ending, living in the space between anticipation and revelation, enjoying the mystery while it lasts. In a future video, I am definitely going to cover more Avengers Doomsday topics as new information emerges. I will do individual character deep dives, looking at how each hero's arc has been building toward this moment. I will do a complete timeline analysis of the Multiverse Saga, tracing every connection from Loki Season 1 through to the events of Doomsday. And when Secret Wars gets closer, we will spend another long evening together, going through all the theories for that film too. But for now, I think we have covered enough ground for one night. We started with Dr. Doom, a scarred boy from Latveria who lost everything and rebuilt himself into the most dangerous man in the Marvel Universe. We trace the road to Doomsday through the multiverse, from the TVA to Loki's sacrifice to the cascading incursions threatening all of reality. We went through the massive cast, every team, every hero, every actor confirmed to be fighting Doom. We explored the theories, from the devastating opening incursion to the final battle in Latveria to the creation of Battleworld. We talked about who might not survive, and we discussed how Doomsday sets up Secret Wars and the potential reset of the entire MCU. That is a lot of ground to cover, and I hope, if you have been listening as you drift off, that the stories carried you gently into sleep, that the theories swirled around you like comforting background noise, familiar and warm, and just complex enough to keep your mind engaged without demanding too much energy. That is what these videos are for, to give you something interesting and immersive to fall asleep to let the stories do what stories have always done, carry us somewhere else. Thank you for spending the evening with me. Thank you for being here. And thank you for caring about these characters and these stories as much as I do. It means more than I can say. Until next time, my dear adventurers, stay safe and sweet dreams. Actually, before we fully wrap up, there are a couple more things I want to touch on. Consider this the bonus round. A few extra theories and observations that I could not fit into the main sections, but that I think are worth mentioning as you settle in for the night. Let us talk about the emotional arcs of the teams for a moment, because I think the personal stakes for each group are what will make Doomsday feel grounded despite its cosmic scale. For the Avengers, this is a story about legacy. The original team is broken. Tony is dead. Natasha is dead. Steve retired. The Avengers, as we knew them, do not exist anymore. Sam Wilson is carrying the shield, but he is still finding his footing as Captain America. Bucky Barnes is trying to atone for decades of violence that was not his choice. The question for the Avengers in Doomsday is whether the idea of the team can survive the loss of its founders, whether new heroes can carry the weight of the name Avenger and make it mean something in a crisis that dwarfs anything the originals ever faced. If Steve Rogers returns and stands beside Sam, passing the torch not through a quiet conversation on a park bench, but through shared combat against an apocalyptic threat. That is powerful storytelling. It says the legacy is not about one person. It is about the idea, and ideas, unlike people, do not die. For the Fantastic Four, this is a story about family. Everything about the Fantastic Four has always been about family. They are not just teammates. They are a husband and wife, a brother, and a best friend. They argue, they bicker, they drive each other crazy, but they love each other unconditionally. And now they have a child, Franklin, who may be the most powerful being in the multiverse, and who is apparently on Dr. Doom's radar. The stakes for the Four are not abstract. They are not fighting to save a concept like the multiverse. They are fighting to save their son. Every parent in the audience will understand that motivation on a visceral level. It does not matter how big the threat is. What matters is your child. And Doom, the man who lost his own parents, who was shaped by that loss into a conqueror, is now threatening to take a child from the people who love him most. The thematic resonance between Doom's origin and the Fantastic Four's fear is extraordinary. Doom was orphaned by tragedy and became a monster. Franklin could be orphaned by Doom and become, what? A weapon? A tool? A god under Doom's control? Or the key to Doom's defeat? A child whose power even God Emperor Doom cannot contain. For the X-Men, this is a story about survival. Mutants have always been outsiders. In the comics and in the Fox films, the X-Men have faced persecution, hatred, and attempts at extermination. They have fought for a world that fears and hates them, not because that world deserves their protection, but because Professor Xavier believed that coexistence was possible. The X-Men in Doomsday are arriving from a universe that has already survived multiple incursions. They have already watched worlds die. They have already lost friends and allies. They are tired, scarred, and suspicious. And now they are being asked to trust strangers from another universe, to fight alongside people they have never met, for a cause that may already be lost. The X-Men's participation in Doomsday represents something beautiful about the MCU's future. For decades, the X-Men and the Avengers existed in separate cinematic universes due to rights issues between Fox and Marvel. They could never meet. They could never fight together. They could never share a screen. Doomsday changes that permanently, and the in-story justification that the X-Men come from a dying universe and must find allies in a new one mirrors the real-world reality of Fox's Marvel properties being absorbed into the MCU. The X-Men are not just joining the fight, they are joining the family. For the Thunderbolts, this is a story about redemption. Every member of the Thunderbolts is damaged. Yelena was raised as a brainwashed assassin. Bucky was a mind-controlled killer for decades. John Walker was a disgraced Captain America who murdered a man in a fit of rage. Ghost is a woman in constant pain. The Sentry is a god who is terrified of his own power. These are not heroes in the traditional sense. They are people who have done terrible things and are trying to be better. And Doomsday is their chance to prove that they can be more than their worst moments. If a Thunderbolt dies saving others in Doomsday, it will not just be a heroic sacrifice. It'll be a statement about the possibility of change. That no matter what you have done, no matter how broken you are, you can choose to do something good. You can choose to be a hero, even if it kills you, especially if it kills you. That message, delivered through characters who have been assassins and soldiers and weapons their entire lives, is incredibly powerful. And then there is Doom himself, Victor Von Doom, the man behind the mask, the boy who lost everything and decided the world owed him everything in return. I keep coming back to his backstory because I think it is the key to understanding everything he does in Doomsday. Doom is not evil for the sake of being evil. He is not a cackling supervillain who wants to watch the world burn. He is a grieving son who never processed his grief, a brilliant mind that was scarred, literally and figuratively, by an accident that was at least partly his own fault. A man who built walls around himself, literally encasing his body in metal armor, because he could not bear to be vulnerable again. Everything Doom does, every conquest, every scheme, every act of tyranny is a response to that original wound. If he can control the world, no one can hurt him again. If he can become God, he can finally rescue his mother's soul. If he can remake reality itself, he can create a world where the tragedy that defined him never happened. Doom is not motivated by greed or hatred. He is motivated by pain, and that makes him, in a strange and terrible way, sympathetic. The best villains are always the ones you can understand, not agree with, not excuse, but understand. You understand why Thanos believed the universe needed balance, even as you hated what he did to achieve it. You understand why Killmonger wanted to help the oppressed, even as his methods became monstrous. And if the Russos and Downey do their jobs right, you will understand why Doom believes he is the only one who can save the multiverse, even as you watch him destroy it. That understanding, that empathy for a character who is doing terrible things for reasons that make a twisted kind of sense, is what elevates a villain from good to great. And it is what could make Dr. Doom the greatest villain in superhero movie history. Greater than Thanos. Greater than the Joker. Greater than Magneto. Because Doom is not just powerful. He is human. He is broken. And he believes, with the absolute conviction of someone who has suffered more than anyone should have to suffer, that his way is the only way. That is the tragedy of Dr. Doom. And that is the tragedy of Avengers Doomsday. A man who could have been a hero, who had the intelligence and the power to change the world for the better, instead chose to change it through domination, because domination was the only language his grief could speak. And standing against him will be the heroes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Imperfect, flawed, messy, beautiful people who chose a different path, who chose cooperation over control, who chose sacrifice over power, who chose to trust each other even when trust was hard, even when they disagreed, even when the stakes were impossible. That conflict between Doom's solitary genius and the Avengers' collective courage is the heart of Doomsday. And it is a conflict that has no easy answer. Because Doom is not wrong about everything. The multiverse is fragile. People do suffer. Humanity is flawed. But the Avengers represent the belief that those flaws are not weaknesses. They are what make us worth saving. And they are what make the fight worth fighting, even when you know you might lose. So that is where I will leave you tonight, with that thought, with that feeling, the feeling that somewhere out there, in a fictional universe that feels real enough to touch, heroes are gathering for one last stand. They are scared. They are outnumbered. They are facing a villain who might be smarter and more powerful than all of them combined. But they are going anyway, because that is what heroes do. Sleep well, my friends, and when you dream tonight, dream of heroes. And if you are still listening, still awake, still here with me in these quiet hours, I want to say one more thing. The reason we love these stories, the reason we stay up late theorizing about fictional characters and imaginary worlds, is not because we think they are real. It is because they make us feel something real: hope, courage, belonging, the sense that even in the darkest times, there are people who will stand up and fight for what is right. That sense does not come from a comic book or a movie screen. It comes from inside us. The stories just help us find it. The MCU, for all its flaws and all its imperfections, has given millions of people around the world a shared language of heroism, a common mythology for our time. When we talk about the Avengers, we are not just talking about fictional characters. We are talking about the values they represent: sacrifice, courage, loyalty, the belief that one person can make a difference and that many people working together can change the world. Avengers Doomsday is going to test those values like they have never been tested before. Dr. Doom is going to push the heroes to their absolute limits. Some of them will fall, some of them will lose themselves. The multiverse itself may break apart. But the thing about heroes is that they do not stay down. They get back up. They always get back up. And when they do, when the dust settles and the music swells and the shield is raised one more time, we will be right there with them, cheering, crying, feeling every single moment, because that is what stories are for. They carry us through the darkness. They remind us of the light. And on the best nights, when the theories are swirling and the anticipation is building and the future feels full of infinite possibility, they carry us gently to sleep. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about these characters as much as they deserve to be cared about. I will see you again soon with more stories, more theories, and more adventures to share. Until next time, my dear friends, sleep well, stay safe, and remember, even in the face of doomsday, the Avengers assemble. Good night. One last thought before the silence settles in. I have been thinking about something that I believe is worth sharing. There is a reason Dr. Doom wears a mask. It is not just to hide his scars. It is to hide his humanity. Behind that iron face, Victor Von Doom is still the boy who cried when his mother died. He is still the young man who raged when the world rejected him. He is still human, no matter how desperately he tries to be something more. And I think that is the key to defeating him. Not with more power, not with bigger weapons, but by reaching the person underneath the armor, by reminding him that he was not always a monster, that he was once a child who was loved. That is the story I hope Avengers Doomsday tells. Not just a story about stopping a villain, but a story about understanding one. Because understanding is the first step toward compassion. And compassion, in the end, is the most powerful force in any universe. And with that, the evening draws to a close. The theories will still be here in the morning. The characters will still be waiting for their moment on screen. The multiverse, in all its infinite complexity, will still be spinning. But for now, let the silence be comfortable. Let the darkness be warm. Let your mind wander through the corridors of Latveria, through the shining halls of Asgard, through the quiet rooms of the Baxter Building, where a child with cosmic power sleeps peacefully while his parents keep watch. These are the images I want you to carry into your dreams. Not the battles, not the destruction, but the quiet moments, the love between a father and his daughter, the friendship between two people who would die for each other, the hope that tomorrow will be better than today. Those are the moments that matter. Those are the stories worth telling. And those are the dreams worth having.